FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Orin Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Orin is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Orin's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Orin's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Orin trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orinresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 2/20/19. Well, thank goodness I don't live in Virginia because, well, I wouldn't have voted for those bums anyway. But if there were ever any bums that should have been thrown out of office, it's these guys. You got 2 racists and a spouse or girlfriend beater. And which is worse, you can decide for yourself. Point is, under the ancient teachings of Maimonides, well, maybe this would have been handled a little bit differently. Expert, if you're not familiar with Maimonides, great Hebrew teacher. And hey, as always, if something hits you, email us, participate, KL@KerryLutz is the email. So, Jeffrey Katz, back with us, author of The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher. And Jeff, welcome back again. And Maimonides. So Maimonides would have been done like a Donald Trump and say, you're fired, if a guy like Northam came up with this madness.
Gary, it's great to be back with you here. If you recall, Maimonides has a lot of ancient wisdom that's applicable right for our own time. He lived about 800 years ago as, a Renaissance man. Hundreds of years before the Renaissance, he was a religious thinker, philosopher, rabbi, one of the most preeminent doctors, physicians of his time. He was the court doctor to the Sultan Saladin in Egypt, in Cairo, and he's actually the only figure after Bible times who's celebrated by the 3 great Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And when those 3 get together on something, Gary, I'm sure we got something very special there. And yes, your recollection about Maimonides' teachings on forgiveness are correct. And Maimonides here would do a Donald Trump and tell Northam, you're fired. Because Maimonides taught on forgiveness that, if on an interpersonal basis someone does something wrong to us and asks us to forgiveness, we should be very forthcoming with that. But in terms of public officials who are role models for, our kids and society generally, the standard is a different one, and the standard is higher. The standard would be that someone does not achieve complete redemption or forgiveness until he's back or she is back in the same position they were in before, and then chooses a different path. Now here, again, same position as before and chooses a different path. So here, because Northam's transgressions, if you will, were, blackface and things that he did decades ago, but because of his terrible insensitivity to race issues, the question for Maimonides and for this question of has he righted the wrong would be, what has his record been and what has he done for race relations since the time, all those decades ago, of these incidents? And all you need to do, Kerry, is look back to Northam's last election and those ads he ran against his opponent and the supporters of his opponent, Ed Gillespie, really painting Gillespie's supporters, his opponent's supporters, as violent racists, bent on physically harming minorities and all these other terrible things, which he really just made up so cynically for partisan political advantage. So Northam showed there, Gary, that he's really not very interested in soothing race relations and in doing things to help minorities, because by his cynically exploiting the race issue to help his, for personal political partisan gain, he really showed where he's at on that issue. So he fails that test, flunks it, so he should resign.
Hey, well, I don't know what's worse, wearing a KKK robe and cap or putting on blackface, and we really don't know what he did, but he certainly did something. And the idea that this guy could become governor, that nobody figured this out. The first thing you do when you're doing opposition research is go look at the people's yearbook, to go look at the things they've written, all these things, and they never bothered. So the Republicans missed an easy opportunity here, and it just shows their incompetence. Democrats wouldn't have missed it. Why I agree with you on the theory that he's a racial opportunist and no better than a Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. He's just a total poverty pimp, using it to get himself into office. The problem with forcing the guy to resign is that double standards, because should anybody be fired because of this? I mean, is the question that he didn't heal racial tensions when he had the chance? He rather stoked the flames, and therefore he should be gone. So that's worse than the actual initial offense of blackface or KKK robe? Or is it that the guy really feels remorse and deserves a second chance, and let the voters of Virginia, they're stuck with him for 4 years now. I don't see anybody impeaching him. They won't impeach the guy, the lieutenant governor, who basically beat up his, I don't know if his girlfriend or his spouse, but it was pretty nasty. I mean, you've just got all of these characters. And then the third person is the Virginia State Attorney General, and he evidently had a blackface hobby too. So what I'm wondering about is, how widespread is this hypocrisy? How bad is it? Is this just the tip of the iceberg?
Well, we're really it's a great question, and we're really facing a serious and sobering issue, in our society now, because as these things come to light, we want people to run for office, and we want to get as good and as qualified people as we can, into public service. So it certainly works counter to that if people are going to be afraid that if they ever, laughed at an off-color joke when they were teenagers and somehow someone recorded that, or if they ever told an off-color joke, decades ago, whether that is going to come back to haunt them. But, I would say that there's a lot of room here for good faith, bipartisan action, because a lot of this really stems from all these gotchas, the politics of personal destruction, which really both sides, are very much involved in. And of course, as you mentioned, we've got the research teams and, the vetting crews, all set to dig this stuff up. But I'm wondering if we wouldn't all be a lot better off if we would shift the focus of our lives a little bit from the negative to the positive. And that's really what my book, The Secret Life, a book of wisdom about the teachings of Maimonides, it's really what it's all about, Carrie. It's shifting the focus of our lives from the negative to the positive, even to the extent where good things that we do, we don't go out and post them immediately on Facebook or other social media. We let them kind of well up inside us and build ourselves up and nurture ourselves from the inside out, and in that way establish ourselves as sovereign individuals with with a deep spirituality and refinement that comes from within. And then through the techniques of unconditional love and other important secrets that Maimonides has for us, we spread those to our family, and then through pursuing our higher calling to the outside world. But one thing I just want to notice, there's a lot of room here for bipartisan action, and again, turning the whole cycle from negativity to positivity. I mean, for example, Maimonides teaches that the greatest charity one can do is not a lifetime of handouts, even though if you need to, you should do that. But that's really not optimal. What's optimal is to teach a man to fish, teach a person to fish. Don't give him fish. And that saying is attributed to Maimonides, after all. And Maimonides taught that self-sufficiency, really is the greatest thing we can ever give anybody. So why do we not have a federal jobs retraining program now? I mean, we are churning out, creating millions of new good jobs in this country now. It should be the highest national priority to get people off public assistance and into those good jobs, not hoping that people come in from outside the country to fill the jobs, but in fact to retrain Americans to do those jobs.
That reminds me, teach a man to fish. I mean, give a man a gun and he can rob a person. Give a man a bank and he can rob the world. So, but let's take this over to the Jussie Smollett case, where this is a case of alleged racism that he encountered at the hands of imaginary Trump supporters. It's turned out to be a farce. It's turned out that he paid these people to attack him, and they were people he knew. I mean, what does this say? What would Maimonides say about a Jussie Smollett there? What would he think is the proper punishment for this person?
Well, first, let me say that Maimonides was the first to implore people not only to live a secret life of goodness, but also to be one with their heart and with their mouth, and not lie, and certainly not lie so much. So this latest false, what appears to be, a case of someone prominent just paying people to attack him so he could make some kind of partisan claim, it really is the most horrible thing. You know what it's similar to, Carrie? It's similar to someone taking charity under false pretenses, because the worst thing, I mean, of course, that's just stealing, but beyond that, someone who takes charity under false pretenses is really robbing not only the donor, but he's robbing the person who really needed it. I mean, there are people who really need charity. If somebody takes it under false pretenses, not only is he robbing generally, but he's depriving the one who really needs it of that money. Similarly, if someone, our law enforcement resources are not unlimited, even though some people think they are, and first of all, to rob people in our country on one side of the political spectrum, to say that they are racist and then to make up phony stories in pursuit of that claim, robs them of their dignity, and also it robs us all. It robs if you're a taxpayer, it robs a taxpayer of your money, because you've got police and law enforcement, spinning their wheels, wasting time and money and everybody's resources and energy, running down all these phony accusations, to the point where they just see that these are just phony and these are just made up. So it really is the most horrible thing, and it is the opposite of all the things that Maimonides stands for, and he would certainly condemn them in the strongest terms.
Yep, for good reason, too. So this kind of leads to the question, Jeffrey, of where we head to now. How do we deal with this? How do we learn from it? Because Maimonides was big on learning from your errors. And how do we move forward here without thinking that everybody who ever makes a claim of being a victim of a racial attack is lying, even though most of them recently have been, for sure. There's dozens and dozens of incidences. All you have to do is go to thecollegefix.com. You can find a lot of them. how do we not get conned here? And how do we go to try to address the underlying problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Maimonides would say look for the common ground. And there is significant common ground here that if people really were people of goodwill and wanted to work together, there's a lot of room. I'll give you another easy example. I mean, we talked about one easy example would be some massive bipartisan federal jobs retraining program. Another is so obvious, an infrastructure project. I mean, you could, there could be a bipartisan program in Washington picking two poor states, for example, one red and one blue, and then launching a substantial infrastructure project, creating thousands and thousands of new good jobs really needed in each of those poor states. And that is something that the two sides could easily sell to their respective bases, and it would be action based on common ground. It would not immediately reverse the polarization and the feelings of hostility and ill will between the two sides. But Maimonides had another great insight, which we discuss in the book also, whereby you can't. Actions are a lot easier to change than attitudes. If you wait for an attitude to change, you might be waiting forever. Because if you wait for the polarization among the different political camps in this country, if you wait for the polarization to subside, you'll probably be waiting forever. The way to move forward is to act on common ground. Seize the common ground. And once people seize the common ground and move forward, even though the polarization is not immediately addressed, when people work together constructively and productively, Kerry, the attitudes will dissipate over time. So that would be Maimonides' formula in terms of moving forward. Practically, Maimonides is always the most practical person, as anyone who'll read The Secret Life, a Book of Wisdom, will see. Really practical ways to transform your life, amazingly for the better. And the nation could do a similar thing if we follow that recipe. But there has to be some willingness and some goodwill there, to start the process out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't know if government programs are the answer. It seems like most of these programs we've witnessed in the latter 20th century and the early 2000s have generally created a lot more problems than they've solved. But certainly the issues you raise are ones that are valid. You have to ask, well, if we need retraining, what the heck are our schools doing in our colleges? Maybe teaching puppetry and English literature, things like that. I mean, I'm in favor of people being literate, of learning languages, art history, but it's got to be tempered with a dose of reality that you'll be able to graduate from college and actually make a living and pay off your student loans. And if you can't do that, then maybe you got to rethink it. But we spend hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars a year on education. And, all I can think about is that Pink Floyd song, "We Don't Need No Education," because that's what most of the kids seem to think who are attempting to be educated now.
Right. That's a great point. Maimonides has a lot to say about that because he was a strong believer that truth and goodness need to be accepted from whatever source they come. And in education, especially these days, that tends to be a little bit of a problem because it seems that in some quarters, the education itself has become so PC, so politically correct, that sometimes the truth can be ignored because it's inconvenient. And that's something that we have to guard against. Maimonides himself was attacked on that basis in his own lifetime ferociously. He was even, after his death, he was excommunicated, and his works were excommunicated because he dared to accept truth from whatever source it came, whether it was the Bible or whether it was Greek philosophy, or whether it was the best science of his day. Some people just didn't like where he was drawing the truth from. And even in today's society, 800 years later, in our universities, we're almost faced with the same problem. Some people want to ferret out only part of the truth because they're, some of the other truths may not fit the fashions of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's very true. And you got to take truth from wherever it comes. It could be in a rock and roll song. It could be in a rap song. Doesn't matter. The truth is always the truth. And we have to accept it regardless of whether we want to or not. And, I think Maimonides would be shocked by an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she seems to symbolize or represent a portion of the population that now believes that stupidity is a virtue. And it used to be if you were a stupid person and you knew it, you kept your mouth shut and you did whatever you could, but you didn't want to look stupid. But now somehow it's okay for vast swaths of society to show off their stupidity and their ignorance. What would Maimonides say about that?
He would, in fact, indeed be shocked because, remember, Maimonides was a great lover of God, and God is truth. So anyone who's going to say something like, oh, the truth isn't so important, I'd rather be right than factually correct, the truth can be, subservient and secondary to what I want to change in our society. Those are really shocking statements. I mean, all of our, basically Western heritage and tradition, of course, they're against a lot of that also, but most of the advances we've made are because we recognize truth and we recognize the difference between falsehoods and things we just say are true because we want them to be true or we somehow support them or will make money by having it true. That's really different from what is true and from the hard lessons that history has taught us. So Maimonides, as a religious person, very deeply devoted to God, and that shines through in all of his teachings as well. That would be something which really would be a shock to the system of someone who was devoted to truth like Maimonides was.
Yeah, so true. Well, we're just about out of time. So obviously the book is available at Amazon and wherever fine books used to be sold. We're talking about a book by Jeffrey Katz, who we're speaking with now, The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher. And it's about Maimonides, perhaps the greatest teacher ever. We could use a few of them here now to really upset this educational apple cart. So just go over to Amazon and check it out. Great book. Jeffrey, appreciate you coming on. And, by the way, any questions or comments for Jeffrey about Maimonides or truth or wisdom, anything else? Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Please, if you're listening to a podcast or YouTube, please subscribe, share, and like. It really helps me a lot when you do it. Helps get the message out, helps get these ideas out to people who need them. Jeffrey, a pleasure. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Kerry. God bless.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.